Be strong.
Hi, this is Jordan with Stuff to Discuss, and I am here with Denise again with our interview with these beautiful people that we interview. And so I'm going to have her do the introduction as far as who we're interviewing.
Okay, so today we're introducing an actor and radio host, Shawn Crosby, and I hope I said his last name right.
Yes, you said it right, right?
I see your last name right.
It's Crosby with an R. Just get the R in there and we're good.
Crosby. Okay, good.
There you go. All right, so first question, Shawn. What skills are needed to be a toy designer? I mean, we didn't even know you was a toy designer. I've seen you do everything else, but what it takes the skills for that?
Well, I'll tell you, it's all the skills that you build up as a kid doing like model kits, making toy planes or model rocketry or things like that. The skills that you used to get when you took shop class in school, when they used to offer that in junior high and high school, all of those kind of skills. And I have to tell you, so I kind of BS'd my way into my first job as a toy designer because I had those skills of making things. And even if you just make things out of other things, you take stuff apart and bash them together and make sort of Star Wars-y kind of props and stuff for your own entertainment, which I had also been doing as a kid.
Right.
I had gotten sort of a job. I didn't really get paid very well for this, if at all, but I ended up working on movies. I started doing props for things like Star Trek, some of the movies, and then for the Next Generation and things like that, working with a guy who had his own private shop. And based on those skills of making like phasers and tricorders and that kind of stuff, I applied for a job at Mattel Toys, but I'd never done it before. It just sounded cool, right? Who doesn't want to make toys?
Right.
And I thought, well, I have some cool models and stuff I can show, and that'll be great. And that's kind of how I got some prop and special effects jobs. Is I would like go into a job interview for working on like one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and go, well, this is the Freddy glove that I made from scratch in my garage, you know, and they're kind of like, yeah, okay, good enough. Come on. You can work for us for a while, and you probably work cheap. So come on in. And so I was living at a museum, and I was caretaker at a museum, and I was doing nothing related to that at all. Right. And then I applied at Mattel, and I went in with my models, and they went, great. And then it was learning how the job worked, how the industry worked. And, you know, it's like anything you do, you sort of jump in and go, okay, what do I need to know to survive? And that was exactly it. I just learned how everything worked in the Mattel world, what they wanted from me. And I ended up working on Hot Wheels and Barbie and Disney stuff and action figures and, you know, stuffed animals and sports equipment. I mean, everything that Mattel did, I ended up having my fingers in that pie because I was like an in-house outside contractor. And I was there for a couple of years. And I worked on board games and remote control cars and whatever they had. I became one of those, do you know how to do this? And of course you say yes, and then you figure it out.
Right.
But
now, this is not the question, but I'm going to ask it. But the Mattel, there's different Mattel. What Mattel location was? There was a certain location that you worked in Mattel, or was it?
Yeah, this was in El Segundo, and I was living in Highland Park at a museum called Heritage Square, which is a whole bunch of old houses in Los Angeles that were moved there to be saved. And so my wife and I were living in a house from 1880. This was about 1990, 91, 92. And I didn't have a driver's license. And so I was riding my bicycle everywhere in Los Angeles. And so I would leave this museum and I would ride 26 miles to El Segundo by Los Angeles International Airport and go to work. and then I would ride 26 miles home.
Oh,
I was in great shape. I was a lot less potato shaped, which is what I
bet. Yeah. Oh my God. Denise
that was an amazing job. Maybe one of the best ones I ever had. And in fact, I almost took that experience and ended up working for a company called Kenner, which made Star Wars toys, which would have been like my dream job. And it was in Cincinnati, and I didn't take it.
Oh,
And because I wasn't too sure about moving to Cincinnati.
yeah.
And the month after I didn't take the job, they
Right.
moved everything to Rhode Island to Hasbro. They had joined. I almost lived in Rhode Island.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no. Yes. Oh, tell me, Denise, what part of Rhode Island you're from?
Oh, actually, I live in Johnston. It's not that far from Providence, the capital city. Yeah.
Well, Hasbro is an absolutely gigantic toy company out
Yeah.
there. They make G.I. Joe and they make Star Wars. And really, that's all they need to, because those will keep the company alive forever, much like Mattel has Barbie and Hot Wheels as their sort of products that are evergreen that they'll always make money off of.
Wow.
Exactly.
So funny.
Exactly.
It's funny when you mentioned KRP Cincinnati. I mean, I said KRP Cincinnati. I'm thinking of KRP Cincinnati.
I remember that.
Well,
I
that's
remember
our whole experience with it, which is the Hollywood portrayal of Cincinnati. But I had a friend who worked at that Kenner office in Cincinnati, and he lived over the border in Kentucky and would drive into Ohio to go to work. And he's like, yeah, I'm here in California for a reason. You don't want to go there. And which was hard, because the Star Wars toy line would have been my complete dream to work on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it was sort of like denying that, going, if I'm too chicken to move, then.
Well, that's just the thing. Is taking the leap to move somewhere where you're not familiar and you don't even know, because we all do that, where you second guess yourself. Is this the right choice? Or and in hindsight, then they ended up moving anyway. Then, well, you would have been my neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. But and as a result, we never would have met each other.
Exactly.
Like a mile from each other and never met.
That's right. That's right. I think things have a way to working out, even if we don't understand it at the time.
This is right. Yeah. So speak. Yes. All right.
Yeah, I can't complain at all with my life. It's been weird. It's taken a long, twisting road, but everything I've done has been really interesting, at the very least. Even if I don't get paid for it.
It's
that's
funny.
Right. You know what? It's an experience that you might not have otherwise had. So
that's right. Yeah. That's right. Our interviewers has been saying that. They're like, we just fell into it. That's basically how their life been when we asked these questions and stuff. So exciting.
Exactly.
So now, Shawn, how did it feel to be called and to be a prop builder for Strike? I mean, what was that feeling like? Because I mean, not a lot of most people, how you first like, oh, it'd be cool to work for Disney. It'd be cool, So how did it feel when you first, set us up for that? To take us down that road.
Well, that was another thing that there's sort of two ways you get a job. Well, maybe three ways. So one way, you see the job, there's like an ad for it, you apply for it, and you get it based on your experience and skill. Sometimes somebody who recommends you for the job, and then you get the job and you do that. And this one kind of fell somewhere in between that, where I met a guy at a science fiction convention named Richard Coyle, who was really big on doing replica props that were from pretty much television shows that weren't really around anymore, like say the original Star Trek in 1966. They weren't making any new ones, but people still loved the show, and they wanted the phaser pistol, they wanted communicators and tricorders, and so we would make them for the costuming community and what's now cosplay, because like cosplay wasn't a word or a thing at the time, but people would costume to go to the science fiction conventions in the 70s and 80s as Starfleet officers and whatnot. They would dress as Kirk and Spock and whatever. And of course, you need the accessories. And so we would make these and sell them, in addition to, like, say, Battlestar Galactica stuff, and even stuff going back to Lost in Space or Forbidden Planet or Blade Runner or whatever was interesting to people. We would make this stuff. And we would meet people who worked in the film industry, in, you know, sometimes actors, sometimes people who worked behind the camera or behind the scenes, and they would remember us and go, wow, you know, those guys did really quality work. And so we ended up working for a really neat guy named Greg Jean. And was first off a big Star Trek fan. And so he bought some of our collectibles, and he had real props from the Star Trek films.
Wow.
And the TV series. So we actually got to use some of those for reference, which was really neat, because those are finite. They're very limited in quantity, and like museum pieces now, basically. So that was kind of cool. And so he said, hey, you know, we're working on Star Trek 4 or 5 or 6. Can you come and do these things for me? And sometimes it was grunt work, like soldering lots of light bulbs into a bunch of light up spears so that the Klingons could look mean and menacing and glow in the dark. And sometimes it was designing things where it's like, okay, we need a device that does this or a weapon that does that. And one of my skills, which is very much in evidence by my Star Wars spaceship car, is I have the ability to take normal everyday things and use them out of context and modify them so that they're barely recognizable and become something else. And in the case of Star Trek and things like that, television series, that is a huge budget saving measure, and they absolutely afford that. And so I could go to Radio Shack and grab a pair of stereo microphones and turn it into a, you know, radiation scanner or whatever they needed for the thing. And so this was a little bit of skill and a little bit of nepotism. And Greg Jean, his background had been on a couple of movies that I had worked on when I was a teenager. I used to crash movie sets and volunteer. I knew I wasn't going to get paid, but I just wanted to be on the set doing stuff. And so I would do that. And so Greg worked on things like 1941, if you remember the big Steven Spielberg comedy. It's mostly known for a gigantic Ferris wheel that rolls off the end of the Santa Monica Pier.
Yes.
So Greg built that and the mechanism to run it off the pier and to keep it lit when it went under the water. He also worked on the mothership from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the big spaceship that shows up at the end. He worked on that. And so this guy was kind of like a hero to me. I knew exactly who he was, and you know, whatever he needed me to do, I'm like, you want me to solder light bulbs? I'm soldering light bulbs.
Yeah.
And so it was fun. And every once in a while, you know, I get to look at something on the screen and go, oh yeah, I made that. That's cool.
Hey, that's what I'm saying. It must be a good feeling when you go ahead and be a part of something that, especially like Star Trek and all those other things you mentioned, or you know, you're like, oh, okay, that was, who would know? And then bring it up. It's a good conversational piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Okay, so Shawn, how did you become a founder member of the, what is it, the Enigma? Am I saying it right? The player, yeah.
Enigma Players. Well,
Players Improv, and yeah, how'd you do that?
That was something that I've always been into acting, and I've always enjoyed performing of any sort. I don't have a ton of training in it.
Okay.
But I like to do it. And because basically when you're a performer, you either take a lot of classes and you learn how to do it, you learn what they call the craft, or you learn by doing. And that's what we did with this Enigma Players. We formed an improvisational comedy group that was essentially like the television show Whose Line Is It Anyway, if you've ever seen that.
Yes.
We would do those kind of comedy sports. We would take suggestions from the audience, and we would do it in a science fiction vein. And so most of the people who were involved were in the UCLA course of study. They were getting their masters and doctors, but they were part of the UCLA Science Fiction Club, which was called Enigma, and that's where we took our name from them. And so we became the Enigma Players, and we would go to science fiction conventions, and we would hold fake panels in the schedule that were just meant for entertainment. We'd pretend to be putting on a TV show or something and goof off there, or we would be the halftime entertainment for the masquerade. We would come out and take audience suggestions, and we ended up doing it at San Diego Comic-Con, which is pretty much considered the giant benchmark of conventions. And we would do these things in front of like 3,500 or 4,000 people.
Wow.
And sometimes they loved us and sometimes they didn't. But somebody would give us a suggestion like, what's the worst television show ever? And then you'd have to come out and act out the worst television show ever. And it was one of the things that I did just to keep myself sharp and have just keep building skills. And we took that when we kind of got tired of the improvisational stuff and we started writing more sketch comedy. We started doing variety shows at the conventions as well. And so we would take a theme that we liked and kind of riff on that and build a 2-hour show around it. And so we did The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We did a 1960s end of the world telethon where they were like trying to raise money for to pay off a villain, like a Dr. No kind of James Bond villain who was going to blow up the world, but he wanted $2 million. So we decided to host a telethon to raise the $2 million. We did a Moulin Rouge thing set on a space station. We just whatever kind of inspired us to do it. And it'd be really crazy. And sometimes we'd be in a room with 300, 400 people. And sometimes we'd be in the arena at the Anaheim Convention Center across from Disneyland with that whole arena full of people.
Oh, that must feel really exciting too when you got a certain audience of people in the to your creation, what you created, and then also bringing it to life. It's amazing. Wow.
Well, and they were our captive audience too, because they're all science fiction geeks, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
Exactly what they were going to like, and we would play to that.
Yeah,
and so
that's right.
We would do something that we knew was going to get a big cheer out of somebody, whatever. And like the Moulin Rouge thing, we put a lot of Queen music in it because we knew everybody likes Queen, and that's a safe bet.
Yes.
That's fun. That is totally fun. Wow. They do what you got to do. But San Diego, to have that much audience like that and just expand.
It's amazing.
It's a difference. Everyone has. I love San Diego Comic-Con because everybody is just doing them and having fun at the same time. So it's really cool.
Well, and it's really kind of more of a trade show and less like a convention because convention, you go, you hang out with your friends and you do that. And there's some of that at San Diego, but so much of it surrounds the merchandise floor, the dealer room. Right. And so much of it is involved with the studios promoting whatever's coming up that it's really kind of like going to the auto show and looking at the cars and seeing what's coming up with the cars. It's almost what San Diego is like. And so it's a different mindset than, say, the Gallifrey convention we have over here, which tops out at about 4,000 people, which is still fairly respectable.
Still a lot.
But it's all focused on Doctor Who, and the actors come and hang out because it's considered a small convention. And so the actors from Doctor Who will just wander around and say hi to you.
Oh, wow.
And some of them are crazy. Like Sir John Hurt was there one year, and he's just wandering the halls. I'm so glad everybody likes Doctor Who. It was really funny. And then you go to San Diego Comic-Con, and it's 150,000 people, and you can't move.
Yeah.
I know, right? I mean, Denise went to when they came out and visited. Denise, her and her mom, they got a chance to witness LA Comic-Con. So we was telling them this is like half of what San Diego Comic-Con is.
Still respectable though. They still got 60,000 people in there, and fun. But you could breathe. You kind of had elbow room at LA Comic-Con, and we've done shows there too, where we took H.P. Lovecraft stories, the horror stories, and made them into a radio broadcast, like the old time 1940s radio show.
Wow. Okay.
And we did that live on stage for people. A buddy of mine, David, who's worked with us on shows before, he spearheaded this group that would do these horror stories, which were great. And so we'd be up there telling creepy stories with the lights down low, a bunch of microphones in front of us. And it was just like they did in the 1940s for the radio dramas.
Right.
And I love stuff like that. And I love that going to conventions, the fans are open to things like that. It doesn't have to be like, well, what's the TV show and what's the movie, or,
Exactly.
where's my author at? It's like, what are fans doing? What's the cool stuff that people who are me are doing? And we filled the room, which surprised me, because I thought for sure at LA Comic-Con people had better things to do than come see us.
The time they went was actually interesting, because LA Comic-Con was like in 2 buildings, and it was like you went across, and that was exciting for me, because I was like, oh, this is cool. You didn't just stay in one building or whatever. They had it where you went across where the vendors were, and then you went across the other way, and it was actually more exciting. So, and then of course, we were one of the vendors, but I was like, but yeah, no, that was awesome. But they do that again at the time, and I'm like, oh crap, it's been cool. I like where you could just travel over. That's why San Diego Comic-Con I like too, where if you didn't go inside, you still got outside, where you got all these other things going on, and people still can experience it and have fun. So that's really cool.
And San Diego is kind of unusual in that case, where first off, they canceled it this year because of COVID, and there's no way you could social distance at San Diego. Like, you could be in a plastic bubble and it wouldn't be enough. But you don't. And sometimes you can't get into San Diego Comic-Con, where they like run out of tickets or run out of space, and there's no way to do it. The fire marshal stands outside and says, no more people. You can be in the town around the convention center and still have a really awesome Comic-Con experience, because you still run into celebrities. There are some groups like Zachary Levi, who was in the show.
Oh, yes.
He ran a complete program outside of Comic-Con raising money for charity. So if you wanted to go see the cast of a TV show like Firefly or something, he would get them all together, charge people $10 to come sit in there, or a donation. It's like, make a donation and you get to come in. And then he would raise all this money for charity, having his own little Comic-Con outside the main Comic-Con.
Oh, that's great. See, I like that when they do. Yeah.
No, and I didn't know they was doing that, because one of the guys that we know, we interviewed him. He was our guinea pig, Dave Rivers.
Dave.
Poor Dave, yeah. And but he was saying, when we would run into him, and he would go, hey, I'm going to one of those parties or after parties. I'm like, they have that? I didn't even know that was going on. And he was like, yeah. And he was just bouncing to, each after party that was going on. And it was like, wow, it's kind of like the whole, when the award shows and you have the after party, I guess.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the industry part of it, whereas like the after party is held by DC Comics or Lucasfilm or one of the licensees who just like Diamond Select just makes toys out of other people's projects and things. And they'll hold a party, they'll have displays of what's coming out, and a lot of times they will schmooze people who are like the buyer from Walmart who came down to see what the new toys are going to be for next year, and business happens there, and then they'll invite fans there because their energy is really good.
Yeah, and that's right.
Who doesn't want to be at a party, grazing off of really good food and hanging out with total
exactly.
Right? Yeah, that is totally. Yeah, that's like, that is the most exciting times. Yeah, so we'll get it back. Yes. All right.
Oh yeah, I'm not worried. It's just you totally want to do it when it's safe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I love what we're being able to do now. That's sort of like fan related stuff, like some of these car shows where we put our cars on display,
right?
And people drive through like it's the Lion Country Safari or something, and they look at the cars and they point and they take pictures.
Yes.
It's
my dad always wanted to take our family to Lion Country Safari when it was out here in California, and he used to be out here. But he thought about my brother. He's like, oh, no, because you remember those roll down windows, and now you can't.
Oh, yeah.
So
you can't roll it up fast enough.
Now you got to settle for the Jungle Cruise. It's about the same.
I was about to say, okay, got you. See,
more robots, fewer real animals.
Is that what it is? Got you. All right.
It's me. I'm sorry, Joanne. This is what happens all the time. I get so involved in what we're talking about that I just.
It's a good conversation. Yes.
Right. Exactly.
It makes me feel like I'm at least interesting.
You are.
You are. It's a lot of things that we don't know, Joanne. A lot of them, I assume that you would know. I wouldn't know.
No, they spring it on me. Me and Shawn. Well, because my, he knows my husband and your brother, which is your brother, and he knows, Justin, of course. And when we go to these car events, we sit down and have time to talk to other people, but still don't get the gist. I mean, as far as when it comes to all the information they give us, and it's still not all we know about them. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know you did that. I didn't know you did that. So,
because I guess it is true though. Like we all just keep on learning different things.
Yeah.
There's no like cap on learning.
Yes. And
things that you don't know. And I like this because I don't know a lot. So I want this.
Well, but the thing that's really funny is that our experiences that we have, we look at them and go, yeah, I did that. That was cool. And I'm proud to have done a lot of the things I've done. And I think on paper, they're very, very interesting. But we all have that. Everybody has something that's like you guys have things that are not my experience that are really fascinating.
Oh, wow.
And that's the cool thing about being able to do, podcasts like this, or even, chatting on Zoom or things. So you get to learn about other people and what they do and how their experience, you're on the same planet, you're in the same country, you may even be the same age, but you have wildly different backgrounds. And that's super cool. And that's the best thing about going to a party is like learning about stuff like that. Go, wow, that's neat.
Right? Yeah. It is interesting. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like being on set for the Goldbergs and Schooled?
Yes. Tell it all.
Well, the Goldbergs is run by Adam F. Goldberg. He took his actual life experiences growing up in Ohio, and he made this show around them. But before he did that, he had done a couple of productions because he's a super, super nerd. And I say that with all respect and in a very loving way. He's a really great guy. So Adam worked on something with the guy who did Ready Player One. If you remember the movie Ready Player One.
Oh, yeah.
Ernest Cline wrote that book. And he worked on the movie script with Adam Goldberg, and they created a movie called Fanboys. And this was a story about kids going from Ohio to San Francisco on a big road trip in 1999 to get their hands on Star Wars Episode 1 when they started making Star Wars movies again. They needed to get that film because one of their friends was sick, and they wanted to make sure that he saw it in case he didn't make it. So they do this epic goofball buddy road trip. And Dan Fogler was in this. Kristen Bell was in it before she was like super crazy famous. And there were a whole bunch of people who were really interesting in this movie. Danny Trejo makes an appearance. William Shatner makes an appearance. And they did this really goofball thing that I ended up working on here in Los Angeles when they did some reshoots. They needed to create a fake version of George Lucas's office. And I and a bunch of other fans got the call to bring down every collectible and toy and thing that we owned that was Star Wars related, our costumes. And they basically took this American Red Cross building, which is where they do their disaster relief out of. It's a house in Pasadena that's a beautiful, gorgeous old mansion. They used to shoot Glee there a lot too. When they went to the alternate school in Glee. It was like Dalton Academy, I think is what they called it. And so that was there, and they shot in the same room that we did. And so it's beautiful wood paneling and this house that was built in the late 1800s and just gorgeous. So we turned it into George Lucas's office and put all our stuff in there. And we hung out for a couple of days while they shot this. They let us hang out on set. We kind of got to know people and whatnot. And then when Adam Goldberg started working on a show called Breaking In, which was a Christian Slater show, about a security team of nerds who would do weird protective and escort duty for things, or they would have to hack into stuff, and it was all played for laughs. But it was a fun kind of half-hour sitcom.
Okay.
I got to go on that as a stormtrooper in my Star Wars stormtrooper
wow.
armor and be a sort of a background character. And then they did a fake science fiction convention, and they wanted to populate that, so they called a bunch of us in to do that. And so that was the first thing we got to do directly with Adam Goldberg, and he remembered us from that. And so when the Goldbergs became a thing, and it was a much more personal project, we got invited in to be background characters and things when they were going to the Star Wars movies that took place in the 1980s, that sort of time frame. Return of the Jedi came out in 1983. And so that was a big milestone in Adam's life, so he wanted to recreate it on the show. And so he had a whole bunch of us come down in costume and do it. And what was super nice, because he remembered me from the Breaking In show, where we were there on the final episode, which was all Star Wars related, which they never aired. They canceled the show before they got to show this particular episode. But it was super Star Wars related. We did the same thing. We recreated the Star Wars environment with all our props and toys and things. And I got to be kind of a consultant on set where they'd talk about, lightsaber fighting and using the Force and things like that. And I'd have to instruct some of the actors on the proper ways to do that. It was a very weird day. But he remembered this, and he wrote a part for me, specifically for me. And so the Star Wars costuming thing I work with the Rebel Legion and the 501st Legion, which are huge costume groups that have about 10,000 members each, all around the world, that all have Star Wars costumes. And we all raise money for charity. We do the 24-hour Relay for Life cancer walks. We do Make-A-Wish Foundation stuff, Starlight Children's Foundation, and lots and lots and lots of visits to schools, libraries, kids' hospitals, wherever they need us, we go. And we don't charge for this. We do it all for free. We pay for our own costumes. My Star Wars car came out of that kind of a project because Batman's got a Batmobile. I wanted a cool car. And so we've made an impression on people over the years. And Adam was so cool that he created a part for my sort of Star Wars-y character, which my nickname has become Obi-Shawn. So I get this note.
I like that nickname.
It is.
It's fun. And my wife got it on my license plate, so I'm stuck with it forever. It's like,
that's great.
Yeah.
But like nicknames start out kind of creepy. I've kind of grown into it. I'm like, yeah, okay, it sort of works. But I get this call from a casting agent that says, hey, we have a part here on the Goldbergs that we think you'd be good for. Would you want to come in and test for it?
Mm.
And I wasn't a member of SAG or anything. I had done a couple TV shows here and there, like we did Deal or No Deal, where we were stormtroopers with briefcases, and that kind of thing. And so we had a couple of credits like that, but I wasn't a member of the Screen Actors Guild or anything along those lines. So it was kind of weird that they called me out of the blue. And I said, sure, I'd love to do it. When do you want me to come down? You're at Sony Studios, which is only a couple of miles from me. And they said, well, here's a time, here's a date, come on down. And I said, well, do you want me to come in costume? And she says, can you do that? I'm like, oh yeah, really easy. I'll just throw on the Obi-Wan robes and I'll show up in the Star Wars car, let's do it. And I read the script. I said, there's a part for Yoda in here. Do you want me to bring the Yoda puppet? And she says, can you do that? And I'm like, yes. This is actually me. Do you see where it says Obi-Shawn? That's my nickname. And she's like, oh yeah, he's a Jedi. I'm like, yeah, he's me as a Jedi. But I'll just see you at the reading. And she's like, okay. And so I go and I drive to the studio, and I've got Nissan 350Z Star Wars car with R2-D2 and laser guns. It looks totally, totally cool. I'm dressed as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I've got Yoda in the front seat as a puppet that I take with me to charity events. And I roll up to the gate, and the guard looks at the card. He's like, this is kind of weird. Are you on the list? And I give him my ID. I tell him I'm on the list, and he looks it up, and he's like, oh, okay, great. You're here for the Goldbergs. That's terrific. And you're going to casting. And oh my gosh, you just missed them. I'm like, I just do. And he said, you just James Earl Jones and Carrie Fisher. They just left like 5 minutes ago. And I'm like, what were they doing here? It's like they were on The Big Bang Theory. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I was bummed. I'm like, oh man, that would have been great. Pulling in as they pulled out would have been super cool. I'm sure they would have hated it, but Carrie Fisher's a blast, and she would have laughed her butt off. But so I drive in, and it takes me about 20 minutes to get to casting, not because I'm lost or because there's it's a long way to get there, because people keep stopping me. And they want pictures, and people from other productions are coming out, and they're like, we're working on the Star Trek movie over on stage 27. And, they would come out and look at stuff. And so I finally make it through. And Sony Studios used to be MGM Studios. It's where they filmed The Wizard of Oz. It's got a lot of history, and a lot of the buildings are still that old. And then they've replaced a bunch of stuff with like other more modern stuff. And, the Ghostbusters, of course, was done there. They did lots of neat things. And so just kind of forcing my way through to the casting building, which was, I think, the Cary Grant building or something. And, finally get there, finally get through all the people, take my last picture. I'm like, look, I'm really late. Honestly, I got to go and do this thing, and I don't want to be a jerk, but they're expecting me.
Already getting the red carpet.
I know. Well, it was weird.
No, right?
Like in a roundabout way. And so I walk in, and there's people like lined up all down the wall, right, looking for an audition. In chairs, and I walk to a desk and I say, hey, I'm Obi-Shawn. They're expecting me at 11:30. And she says, oh yeah, go right in. And so I walk in, Obi-Wan Kenobi costume, Yoda puppet, over my shoulder. And she's like, oh, okay. That's awesome. Oh my gosh, you look amazing. Let's record something. We have to get approval from the network for you to be on the show. And so here's your dialogue, and can you just do it to the camera? And I'm like, sure. And so I do some as me, I do some as Yoda, goof off a bit. And she's like, okay, so this guy's a Jedi, and he's from Star Wars, and he's waiting in line to see the movie, but he's like a big fanboy, and his name's Obi-Shawn. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. My name is Shawn Crosby. This is Obi-Shawn. And she's like, no. He's a character that they made up. Don't be you. And I said, so what happens if they don't like me? What if I like tape this and they decide that they don't like me as Obi-Shawn? They're like, oh, well, we'll find someone else. Ooh. Oh, okay. Well, so the pressure's on.
Yes, it is.
And so I reach into my pocket and I pull out this trading card. And you've seen like baseball cards. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all had like our own Star Wars baseball cards with our character on them and our nickname and all that kind of stuff. And I hand her this card, and she takes it and she looks at it. She flips it over and she looks at the picture and she looks at me and she looks at the name, and then she looks at the script and she looks back at the name, and she's like, "Wait, Obi-Shawn is you." Yes, it's me. Like, that's why I'm here. They wrote this for me, which is really funny. And so we taped all the stuff. I had to do a special message for the casting director's husband and son as Yoda. So they just shot Yoda telling them to be, good kids in school and whatever, and her husband he's a big golf player. So we had Yoda tell him, cheated golf, you will not, And she's like, well, you have a costume. I'm like, I do. And I wore it. And she's like, well, let's go to wardrobe. And so she drags me across the thing to wardrobe, and we walk down in there, and she says, we think this guy's going to be Obi-Shawn in our Goldbergs episode. What do you think of his wardrobe? Can he wear his own stuff? And the costume people stood back and they did a little elevator eyes up and down and they checked my stuff out. And they're like, yeah, we don't have anything like that. He can totally wear his own stuff.
Yeah, they could top that. Yeah, your costume is outstanding. They cannot top your costume. Yes.
Well, and it's gone through several cheesy permutations till I finally got to a really good one. But it was just hysterical in that it was this whole process that I was not really used to. And even though I had like a green light from the production, I still had to go through the whole rigmarole of doing it. And it was a Adam Sandler production for this show.
Okay.
Happy Gilmore, I think is the name of his company.
Right.
And so, we had to go through all their offices. We had to meet all those guys. And then eventually we went to shoot this thing. And when I showed up, you were talking about the red carpet treatment.
Oh, so that was nothing compared when you came.
I was not expecting it because I showed up with my buddy and we get there and I was loaning him my Stormtrooper armor so he could be on set too and make a little money. Yeah. And so we go there and they look at him and go, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm Jeff. I'm a Stormtrooper." And it's okay. And you're going to go over here with these guys and we'll get you set up. And they look at me and go, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Shawn Crosby. I'm Obi Shawn." And he said, "Oh, okay. Well, you have to come with me." And so they split us up and they take me to a trailer with my name on it.
Wow,
I got my own trailer and then I have to go to makeup.
That is cool.
They run me through makeup, which is great. We're sitting in makeup and Sean Giambroni, who's the little boy who plays Adam on the show. He's in the chair next to me dressed as Han Solo. I'm dressed as Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's like, "Oh, you must be Obi-Shawn." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, well you must be Sean Solo." And, we're kind of goofing off and joking around. And so I get out of makeup, I'm in costume, I'm ready to go. And I find my buddies and we walk to set. And we get to set and they're like, "Where have you been?" I'm like, "I walked to set." "We had a golf cart waiting for you. Next time you take the golf cart." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, sorry."
Sorry, yes.
I am not used to that level
You're
of
like,
treatment.
"No, I'm used to, yeah."
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Usually I walk where I go. They don't ask for go.
Yeah, well, and I'm perfectly happy to hang out with my friends who are being extras, but I had a part with dialogue, which made me the cast, which was a little bit of a different situation, and so it was a big learning curve for me to do, but a good one. And it was fun, and so we hung out with most of the cast members over the course of the day. We toured the sets and goofed off. There were a couple of people who had won a contest to be on the show and in that same scene that I was in. And so since I knew my way around the set, I took them and showed them around the set, gave them a little tour because nobody from the production was doing it. They were too busy. So I'm like, "Hey, come with me. Let's crash the set and do a little tour." Stuff.
You're a good crasher. Yes, you are.
Yeah, it was fun. And then the other guest star, I got a co-starring credit, which was like really weird. Co-starring.
Oh, wow.
Crosby as Obi-Shawn, which was really fun.
That's so
really
cool.
Funny. And then the other guest was a guy named Thomas Lennon, who he was Lieutenant Dangle in Reno 9-9. Yeah. And he was in the new Odd Couple redo. He's been in lots and lots of stuff. And he was there in costume too, but he's a normal actor. That was his career. That's what he did. Right. And it was really funny. So we had a good day, and it was always, it's always kind of great to kind of see us in there. And they cut most of my dialogue out. And so I went back. I went back for the sequel series, and we did this all over again for the series called Schooled, where they were going to see episode 1. So we did the Return of the Jedi from 1993, and then episode 1 was 1999, and Schooled takes place in the 90s, where Goldbergs takes place in the 80s. And so we did this whole process all over again. And while doing that one, in that show, in Schooled, all of my lines of dialogue are my voice. And in the Goldbergs one, they are all in Yoda's voice. So in the first one, they cut out everything that I said in my real voice. Right. And in the second one, they cut out everything I said as Yoda.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it was really funny, and even to air that part of the episode, they had to get approval from Lucasfilm and Disney. It's an ABC show, so Disney was pretty on board. But Lucasfilm had to make sure that what we didn't sully the character of Yoda or Obi-Wan at all, and they made distinct, certain, specific choice to use my name of Obi-Shawn, which was really funny. So they didn't have to worry about any copyright stuff.
That's right.
But I'll tell you, it's fun working with a team that's so integrated, and they just have fun together all the time when they're doing stuff, and just being in that atmosphere is so cool.
You have to have that. You have to have that, because if everybody's all tense and you got these, people that's snoozing, it's like kind of, do you know who I am? It's kind of like, well, why? It's no fun. There's no fun in it. And then you get the wrong concept of like, I thought they was cool. And then now they're not. You're like, what's going on?
Well, and you're still on your best behavior, because I ended up sitting behind George Segal, and he's like the venerable old man of entertainment on the show.
Yeah.
And so, he's looking over going, what are you here for, kid? This is weird, You're like, well, I don't want to encroach on your time or your personal space or anything, but, and you figure out where those lines are, and you're a guest on the show. And the first one, did you guys watch Veronica Mars television series?
Yes.
Veronica Mars?
I've never watched it. No.
So Veronica Mars had a guy who was the alternate private eye who was fighting the Mars agency, which was the main agency of the thing. And I think his name was Vinny in the show, but Ken Marino is the actor.
Oh, okay.
And he was the director of the episode. And so he was really cool, but I'm like, you're an actor, but you're directing, and that's like really neat.
Oh yeah.
And so the Goldbergs was doing this thing where they were like giving actors the opportunity to direct stuff because they could. It's a sitcom. How tough can it be? Let's cut your teeth on stuff. And so it was really fun to kind of like get directed by a guy that I had seen all over the place, on on television. And then when we did the second episode on Schooled, that was directed by Leah Thompson from Back to the Future.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Super cool. Yeah. And so there were these little like bonus things that you would get where it's like, oh my gosh, it's Leah Thompson. Neat. And so,
them working behind the scenes is actually pretty cool because then
and it's super fun. And so so we were the last shot of the day, and we did a bunch of stuff, and it was very funny, and you feel good when the crew laughs at you. You know you did the job right. And she was like excited. She came over and gave me a big hug, and I'm like, I did not know that getting a hug from Leah Thompson was on my bucket list, but it is now.
That is so you can't top that one. Yes. Well, you probably top it if you got a hug from George Lucas, but I got you. Yeah, Leah Thompson.
I've had handshakes with George Lucas. I don't need a hug.
You don't want
I have a friend who got a hug, but I don't need a hug.
There you go.
Take the handshake. That's for sure. That's what I would.
I'll take it.
Yes.
High fives are good.
High fives.
That's exactly.